The dust rose in billows as the stagecoach barreled down the rutted trail toward Silverwood, Wyoming territory, 1878. Eliza Garrison clutched the edge of her seat with white knuckles, the letter from her brother James crumpled in her palm. The message had been brief but urgent. Come quickly. I am unwell. Bring whatever money you can spare. It was the first she'd heard from him in nearly 2 years. First time out west, miss. The elderly woman beside her smiled kindly, her face a roadmap of wrinkles carved by sun and time. Is it that obvious? Eliza attempted a smile, tucking a wayward strand of chestnut hair back into her once neat bun. Everyone's got that same look when they first see this country, like they can't decide if it's heaven or hell. The woman chuckled. Where you headed? Silverwood. My brother has a homestead there. The woman's smile faltered. Tough country around those parts. Hope your brothers made friends. Eliza wanted to ask what she meant, but the stagecoach lurched suddenly, throwing her forward as the driver shouted and cracked his whip. The horse's pace quickened to a dangerous gallop. Peering through the dust-coated window, Eliza saw riders approaching from behind, bandanas pulled up over their faces. Road agents, the driver yelled. Hold on, the stagecoach rocked violently as the driver pushed the team harder. A shot rang out, followed by another. The elderly woman beside Eliza gasped and pulled her closer, both of them ducking low. Stop the coach or the next bullet won't miss. A harsh voice commanded from outside. The coach slowed, then lurched to a halt. The door wrenched open, and a man with cold eyes peered in, revolver in hand. Valuables. Now. His gaze fixed on Eliza's reticule clutched tightly in her lap. With trembling hands, she surrendered her purse containing nearly all she had in the world, $53 saved from her schoolteacher's salary. The last of her parents' inheritance that she'd intended to use to help James. Please, Eliza began. I need that money for shut your mouth, lady, the man snarled, snatching the reticule. Another rider approached, his horse dancing nervously. Hurry up, Cole, someone's coming. The first robber cursed, grabbing the remaining passengers' valuables before backing away from the coach. Drive on, he shouted to the driver. And don't look back. As the coach lurched forward, Eliza glimpsed another rider cresting the ridge behind them, a lone figure on horseback. Whether pursuer or merely another traveler, she couldn't tell through her tears of frustration and fear. By the time they reached Silverwood, the sun was dipping low. Eliza stepped down from the coach with her single carpet bag, her heart sinking as she took in the dusty main street lined with weathered buildings. This rough settlement bore little resemblance to the prosperous town James had described in his letters. Miss Garrison. A thin man with spectacles approached. I'm Dr. Wilkins. Your brother asked me to watch for your arrival. How is James? I came as quickly as I could. The doctor's face grew solemn. I'm afraid he's quite ill, pneumonia. He's been asking for you. Take me to him, please. They walked in silence past the saloon where raucous laughter spilled into the street, past the general store with its faded advertisements, and toward the edge of town where a small, sparsely furnished room had been set up in the back of the doctor's office. James lay still on the narrow bed, his face ashen, his breathing labored. At 26, he looked a decade older than when Eliza had last seen him. James, she whispered, rushing to his side, his eyes fluttered open. Eliza, you came. His voice was barely audible. Of course I came. She took his hand, shocked at how thin and cold it felt. My boy, James rasped. Sam, you need to find him. Your boy. Eliza's confusion must have shown on her face. My son, he's 4, at the Anderson farm. James struggled to sit up, then fell back against the pillows. His mother died last winter. I've been caring for him alone. Please, Eliza, promise me you'll look after him. Eliza felt the room tilt. A nephew she hadn't known existed. Of course I will, but you'll get better and we'll care for him together. James shook his head weakly. No time, promise me. I promise, she whispered. Good. He seemed to relax slightly. And watch out for Abner Holt. He wants my land, claims I owe him money. What money? What are you talking about? But James had slipped into unconsciousness, his breathing more labored than before. He needs rest, doctor. Wilkins said gently, guiding her from the room. Miss Garrison, I should tell you, your brother's condition is grave and his affairs are not in order. There are debts. The stagecoach was robbed on the way here, Eliza said numbly. They took everything I had. The doctor's expression grew troubled. I'm sorry to hear that, very sorry indeed. Dawn broke cold and clear over Silverwood. Eliza had spent the night in a chair beside her brother's bed, waking every time his breathing changed, praying for improvement. There was none, Doctor. Wilkins returned at first light, his face grave as he checked James's pulse. He's gone, Miss Garrison. I'm sorry. Eliza felt the world contract around her. She'd traveled so far and still arrived too late. Tears streamed down her face as she clung to her brother's hand, unable to accept that the vibrant young man who'd left Boston with such big dreams had come to this end in a dusty frontier town. What about the boy? Dr. Wilkins asked gently. Sam needs someone now. Eliza wiped her tears, remembering her promise. I'll go to him today. The Anderson farm, James said. Where is it? About 5 miles north of town. I can arrange transportation. Thank you. Eliza straightened her shoulders. And about my brother's arrangements. I have nothing to pay for a burial. The town has a fund for such matters, Dr. Wilkins assured her. Your brother was well liked here despite his troubles. After a simple funeral attended by a handful of townspeople, Eliza found herself riding in a farm wagon driven by the local blacksmith, heading north toward the Anderson place. Her mind raced with questions. Who was Sam's mother? Why had James never mentioned a wife or child in his letters? What would she do now with no money and a child to care for? Anderson Place is just ahead, the blacksmith announced, breaking her reverie. Good folk. They've been looking after the boy as a favor to your brother, but they've got 5 of their own to feed. The farm was modest but well kept, with a weathered 2-story house, a barn, and fenced pastures where cattle grazed. A woman emerged from the house as the wagon approached, wiping her hands on her apron. Behind her, partially hidden in her skirts, stood a small boy with a mop of dark hair. Eliza thanked the blacksmith and climbed down from the wagon on unsteady legs. The woman, Mrs. Anderson, she presumed approached with a sympathetic smile. You must be James's sister. I'm Martha Anderson. We were so sorry to hear about your brother. Thank you for caring for my nephew, Eliza said, her eyes drawn to the child who watched her warily. Sam, come meet your Aunt Eliza, Martha called. She's your papa's sister. The boy stepped forward reluctantly, his eyes so like James's wide with uncertainty. He was small for his age, dressed in patched but clean overalls, his hair in need of a trim. Eliza knelt to his level. Hello, Sam, I'm very happy to meet you. The boy regarded her solemnly. Are you taking me to Papa? The simple question pierced Eliza's heart. Your papa has gone to heaven, Sam. He asked me to take care of you now. Sam's lower lip trembled. He said he was coming back. I know. Eliza fought back tears. He wanted to very much. You'll come inside for some coffee before you go, Martha said. It wasn't a question. Sam, show your aunt the puppies in the barn while I put the kettle on. The boy brightened slightly at the mention of puppies and reached for Eliza's hand. His small fingers in hers made something shift in her chest, a fierce protectiveness she hadn't known she could feel. In the barn, a litter of half-grown pups tumbled over each other in a pen. Sam climbed over the rail and sat cross-legged among them, his grief momentarily forgotten as they licked his face and climbed into his lap. That one's mine, he said, pointing to a black and white pup with one ear that refused to stand upright. Papa said when we got our own place I could keep him. Eliza's heart sank. She had no place to take Sam, let alone a dog. He's wonderful, she said anyway, reaching down to pet the friendly pup. Back in the house, Martha Anderson served coffee and told Eliza what she knew. James had arrived in Silverwood nearly 5 years ago, full of dreams about starting a ranch. He'd fallen in love with a local girl, Mary Thompson, and they'd married quickly. Sam was born a year later. Mary had died of influenza the previous winter. James had been struggling ever since, working odd jobs while trying to hold on to his land claim, relying on neighbors' kindness to help with Sam when work took him away. The boy needs stability, Martha said. James meant well, but she trailed off, not wanting to speak ill of the dead. I understand, Eliza said, though in truth she was overwhelmed. I need to find work and a place for us to stay. What did you do back east? Martha asked. I taught school. Martha's eyes lit up. Our schoolmistress left last month to get married. The town council's been looking for a replacement. For the first time since arriving in Silverwood, Eliza felt a flicker of hope. Teaching was something she knew, something she could do. Who should I speak with? Mayor Dawson handles school matters. I'd go see him right away if I were you." Martha hesitated. "But there's the matter of James's property and debts. Abner Holt's been saying James borrowed money against his homestead claim." Eliza remembered her brother's warning. "James mentioned Mr. Holt, said he wanted his land." Martha nodded grimly. "Holt owns half the businesses in town. He's been trying to buy up all the small homesteads around Silverwood, some say not always honestly." A commotion outside interrupted them, the sound of an approaching horse and men's voices. Martha went to the window and frowned. "Speaking of the devil." Eliza joined her and saw two riders in the yard. The older man, portly and expensively dressed, dismounted with the aid of a younger companion. "That's Abner Holt and his foreman," Martha whispered. "Wonder what brings him out here." The men approached the house, and Martha opened the door before they could knock. "Mr. Holt, this is a surprise, Mrs. Anderson." Holt removed his hat, revealing thinning gray hair. His smile didn't reach his eyes. "I heard James Garrison's sister arrived in town, thought I'd pay my respects." His gaze shifted to Eliza, assessing her in a way that made her skin crawl. "Miss Garrison, I presume." "Abner Holt." He extended his hand. "My condolences for your loss." Eliza shook his hand briefly. "Thank you, Mr. Holt. I had business dealings with your brother. I'd like to discuss them with you at your earliest convenience." "I'm afraid I know very little about my brother's affairs," Eliza replied carefully. "Precisely why we should talk." Holt's smile widened. "Your brother owed me a considerable sum. In lieu of payment, I'm prepared to take possession of his land claim and forgive the debt entirely. It would give you a fresh start, unencumbered." "That's very generous," Eliza said, though instinct warned her otherwise, "but I'd need to review any agreements before making decisions." Holt's expression hardened slightly. "Of course, but don't wait too long. Debts accumulate interest. I'll expect you at my office tomorrow." He replaced his hat and turned to leave, then paused. "I understand you're responsible for the boy now, a burden for a single woman. My offer could solve many problems." After Holt departed, Martha placed a comforting hand on Eliza's arm. "Be careful with that one. James always said Holt's papers were forgeries." "I need to see the homestead," Eliza decided, "and I need to speak with the mayor about the teaching position." The blacksmith returned later to drive Eliza and Sam back to town. The boy was quiet, clutching a small bundle of clothes and a wooden horse his father had carved. Martha had insisted he take the puppy too, saying her husband wouldn't mind. The dog now sat contentedly in Sam's lap, occasionally licking the boy's chin when tears threatened. "We'll stay at the boarding house tonight," Eliza told Sam, though she had no idea how she would pay for it. "Tomorrow we'll see your papa's land." "Will we live there?" Sam asked hopefully. "I'm not sure yet," Eliza answered honestly. "But we'll stay together, I promise." The boarding house was run by a widow named Mrs. Holloway, who took one look at Eliza's fine but travel-worn clothing, the small boy and the puppy, and quoted a price Eliza couldn't possibly afford. "I can work in exchange for lodging," Eliza offered desperately. "Cleaning, cooking, whatever you need." Mrs. Holloway's expression softened slightly. "I do need help with the laundry, but I can't have that dog inside. The puppy can stay in the stable," a deep voice interjected from behind them. Eliza turned to see a tall man in his early 30s standing in the doorway, his broad shoulders filling the frame. Dust covered his clothes, and a day's stubble darkened his jaw, but it was his eyes that caught her attention, a startling blue against his sun-bronzed face. "Jack Ackerman," the man introduced himself with a slight nod. "I've got a ranch outside town. Keep my horse in Mrs. Holloway's stable when I'm here on business." "The dog would be no trouble in the stable," the man continued, addressing Mrs. Holloway. "I'll make sure of it, Mrs." Holloway looked from the stranger to Eliza. "Well, if Mr. Ackerman vouches for the arrangement." "Thank you," Eliza said, both to Mrs. Holloway and the newcomer. The man knelt to Sam's level. "What's your pup's name, partner?" Sam clutched the puppy closer. "Scout. Good name." He reached out to scratch the dog's ears, his large hand gentle. "Scout can stay with my horse, lady. They'll keep each other company." Sam looked up at Eliza, who nodded encouragingly. The boy reluctantly handed over the puppy, which immediately licked the man's face, making Sam giggle despite his apprehension. "I'll take good care of him," Jackson assured Sam. "You can visit him anytime. Mrs. Holloway doesn't mind, do you, madam?" As long as he stays out of my kitchen, the landlady conceded. After settling into a small room at the boarding house and ensuring Sam had something to eat, Eliza made her way to the mayor's office. To her relief, the teaching position was still available. The salary was modest but would cover basic necessities. She could start in a week once the schoolhouse was prepared. "What about my brother's property?" Eliza asked. "I understand he had a land claim." Mayor Dawson shuffled uncomfortably. "Yes, well, that's a bit complicated. Holt claims James borrowed against it. There's paperwork." "May I see this paperwork and the original deed?" "You'd have to speak with Mr. Peterson at the land office." The mayor glanced at the clock. "He's closed for the day, but you can catch him tomorrow morning." As Eliza left the mayor's office, the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the dusty street. She paused, suddenly aware of how alone she was in this strange place, responsible not only for herself but for a grieving child. Miss Garrison. She turned to find Jack Ackerman approaching, leading a magnificent black horse. He'd cleaned up since their encounter at the boarding house, his dark hair still damp from washing. "Mr. Ackerman." "Call me Jack," he said. "I was wondering if you and the boy would join me for supper." The hotel dining room serves decent food. Eliza hesitated. "That's very kind, but I couldn't impose." "It's no imposition. I heard about your brother. James and I weren't close friends, but we did business together occasionally. He spoke of you." Something in his straightforward manner put her at ease. Besides, she had no money for food beyond what Mrs. Holloway had provided for Sam. "Thank you. That would be lovely." During supper, Jack proved to be a good listener as Eliza explained her situation. Sam, initially shy, gradually warmed to the rancher, especially when Jack described his own ranch and the horses he raised. "Your brother's land borders my property to the east," Jack mentioned. "It's good grazing land with a reliable creek. If Holt gets his hands on it, he'll control water access for half the small ranchers in the valley. James warned me about Mr. Holt just before he—" Eliza glanced at Sam, who was contentedly eating apple pie. "He said Holt wants his land and claims James owed him money." Jack's expression darkened. "Holt's pulled that trick before. Suddenly discovers debts after someone dies or falls on hard times. I'd be careful about signing anything he puts in front of you. I plan to visit the land office tomorrow to examine the records, and I'd like to see the property." "I'm heading that direction in the morning," Jack offered. "I could take you and Sam." The next morning dawned clear and cool. After a visit to the land office that raised more questions than answers, the clerk claimed he couldn't find James's original deed. Only a lien document signed in Holt's favor. Eliza and Sam rode with Jack toward the homestead. Sam sat in front of Jack on the saddle, while Eliza rode a gentle mare Jack had borrowed from a friend. Scout trotted happily alongside them. Despite her worries, Eliza couldn't help but admire the rugged beauty of the landscape as they left town behind, the terrain gradually changing from flat prairie to rolling hills dotted with pine and aspen. "There it is," Jack said eventually, pointing to a small cabin nestled against a hillside with a stream curving around the property. A crude barn stood nearby, and the remains of what might have been a garden were visible. It was far humbler than Eliza had imagined from James's letters, which had painted pictures of prosperity and success. Still, there was something appealing about the setting, with the mountains visible in the distance and the clear creek burbling past. "Papa's house," Sam exclaimed excitedly. "Can we go inside?" They dismounted, and Jack lifted Sam down. The boy immediately ran toward the cabin, Scout at his heels. Eliza followed more slowly, taking in the neglected state of the property. The cabin door hung slightly crooked on its hinges, and weeds had overtaken what once might have been a path. Inside, the cabin was spare but not uninhabitable. A stone fireplace dominated one wall. There was a rough-hewn table with 2 chairs, a narrow bed in one corner, and a smaller cot that must have been Sam's. Shelves held a few books, some tools, and cooking utensils. A thin layer of dust covered everything. Sam went directly to a wooden chest and opened it, pulling out a quilt. "Mama made this," he said, hugging it to his chest. "Papa said I could keep it forever." "Of course you can," Eliza assured him, fighting back tears. Jack had remained respectfully by the door. "There's a good well out back," he mentioned, "and the barn needs work, but it's sound." James was planning to expand the herd this year. Herd? Eliza asked. He had a small start, about 20 head of cattle. They're probably grazing up in the north pasture now. Hope flickered in Eliza's heart. If James had livestock, perhaps the situation wasn't as dire as she'd feared. Those cattle could be sold to pay any legitimate debts, she mused. If they're still there, Jack said grimly. Holt's been known to help himself to unattended herds. They were interrupted by the sound of approaching horses. Through the cabin's small window, Eliza saw Abner Holt and 2 other men riding up. Jack's expression hardened. "Stay inside with Sam," he advised, stepping out to meet the newcomers. From the window, Eliza watched as Jack intercepted Holt before he could reach the cabin. The men exchanged words she couldn't hear, Holt gesturing emphatically while Jack stood with arms crossed, unmoving as stone. One of Holt's companions moved his hand toward his gun, but Holt waved him off. Finally, Holt remounted his horse, saying something to Jack before the 3 men rode away. Jack watched them go, then returned to the cabin. "Holt claims he's just checking on his property," Jack reported, his voice tight with anger. "Says he has papers showing James signed over the land 6 months ago." "That's impossible," Eliza protested. "James wrote to me about his plans for this place just 3 months ago. He would never have sold it." "I believe you, but Holt has influence with the territorial judge, without the original deed or witnesses to counter Holt's claim." "What can I do?" Jack considered for a moment. "For now, establish your presence. Move in. Work the land. I'll help you round up James's cattle and get them properly branded. Possession counts for a lot out here." "I know nothing about ranching," Eliza confessed. "I'll teach you what you need to know, and you'll be teaching in town, right?" "You can make this work, Miss Garrison." "Eliza," she corrected him. "If we're to be neighbors, you should call me Eliza." His smile transformed his serious face. "Eliza it is." The next week passed in a whirlwind of activity. Eliza divided her time between preparing the schoolhouse in town and making the cabin habitable. Jack proved invaluable, helping with repairs and teaching her basic ranching skills. He found James's cattle, 17 head, had survived, and showed her how to check the brand. Sam blossomed in the open spaces of the homestead, following Jack like a shadow whenever the rancher visited, which was daily. The boy's grief hadn't disappeared, but it had softened into something manageable, cushioned by the puppy's antics and Jack's patient attention. Eliza began teaching, finding unexpected joy in the small schoolhouse filled with children from farms and ranches for miles around. The town's residents gradually accepted her, offering friendship and support as they learned of her battle with Holt. Not everyone was welcoming, however. Holt made good on his threats, filing a formal claim to the property with the territorial court. The hearing was set for 6 weeks hence, barely enough time for Eliza to gather evidence or witnesses. "We need to find someone who saw the original deed," Jack said one evening as they sat on the cabin's porch, watching Sam play with Scout in the yard. "Or someone who can testify that James never agreed to sell to Holt." "The land office clerk says all the records were destroyed in a fire last year," Eliza sighed. "How convenient for Mr. Holt." "Too convenient," Jack agreed. "But James must have mentioned the property to someone besides me, his wife's family perhaps." "Mary's parents moved to California after she died. James mentioned it in a letter." Eliza hesitated. "There's something else. When I was going through James's things, I found letters from someone named Daniel Wright in Denver. They mentioned legal matters." "Dan Wright, he's a lawyer. Good man." "James must have consulted him about something. I've written to him but haven't received a reply." Jack stood suddenly. "I have business in Denver next week. I could deliver your letter personally, explain the urgency." "You do that." He looked down at her, his expression unreadable in the fading light. "I do a lot more than that to help you, Eliza." The simple statement hung in the air between them, laden with meaning neither was ready to acknowledge. Since her arrival in Silverwood, Jack had become not just a neighbor but a friend, perhaps her only true ally in the fight against Holt. But lately, she'd caught herself watching for his arrival each day, her heart beating faster at the sound of his horse approaching. "Thank you," she said softly. "For everything." The day before Jack was to leave for Denver, Eliza was teaching when a commotion erupted outside the schoolhouse. Dismissing her students to the playground, She stepped out to find several men gathered around her small wagon, the one Jack had helped her purchase to travel between town and the homestead. One of the wheels had been removed, and the axle was damaged. "Someone took a saw to it, Miss Garrison," the blacksmith informed her grimly. "Deliberately." "Who would do such a thing?" Eliza asked, though she already suspected. "Can't prove nothing," the blacksmith said, "but one of Holt's men was seen lurking around earlier. How long will repairs take?" 2 days, maybe 3. I'll need to fashion a new axle." Eliza's heart sank. Sam was staying with Martha Anderson for the day, and Eliza had planned to collect him on her way home. Without the wagon, they'd be stranded in town exactly as Holt likely intended. The schoolteacher's quarters consisted of a single room behind the schoolhouse, barely large enough for one person, let alone a woman, a child, and a growing puppy. "I'll make other arrangements," Eliza said, trying to keep the worry from her voice. As the children departed at the end of the school day, Eliza gathered her things and set out on foot toward the Anderson farm, dreading the long walk back to the homestead with a tired child. She had covered less than a mile when she heard hoofbeats behind her. Jack rode up, leading a second horse. "I heard about your wagon," he said without preamble. "Thought you might need transportation." Relief flooded through her. "How did you know?" "News travels fast in small towns," he said with a wry smile. "Especially bad news." They collected Sam and Scout from the Andersons and rode toward the homestead, the boy seated in front of Jack while Eliza rode the second horse. As they crested the final rise that would bring the cabin into view, Jack suddenly reined in, his body tensing. "Smoke," he said tersely, pointing to a dark plume rising against the evening sky. Fear seized Eliza's heart. "The cabin!" Without answering, Jack kicked his horse into a gallop, keeping a firm arm around Sam. Eliza followed, her borrowed mount struggling to keep pace. They arrived to find the cabin engulfed in flames, the heat so intense they couldn't approach. 2 riders were visible in the distance, moving rapidly away from the property. "Holt's men," Jack growled, his face hard with fury. "Our home," Sam whimpered, burying his face against Jack's chest. "Everything we had," Eliza whispered, watching as the flames devoured what little she and James had possessed. Jack set Sam down and approached the burning structure as close as he dared, assessing whether anything could be saved. But it was clear the cabin was beyond salvation. "You'll come to my ranch," Jack decided, returning to them. "Both of you, it's not safe here anymore." "We can't impose, it's not an imposition," he interrupted firmly. "I have plenty of room, and Holt's less likely to try anything there. My hands would notice strangers approaching." Too numb to argue, Eliza nodded her agreement. They watched silently as the cabin collapsed in on itself, the flames gradually subsiding to smoldering ruins. When there was nothing left to see, Jack helped them mount up, and they rode west as darkness fell toward the safety of his ranch. Jack's home proved to be not the humble cabin Eliza had expected, but a substantial 2-story house built of timber and stone. A bunkhouse, barn, and corrals stood nearby, evidence of a prosperous operation. "It was my father's place," Jack explained as he helped her dismount. "He came out here right after the war, built it up from nothing." Inside, the house was simply but comfortably furnished, with a large stone fireplace, solid wooden furniture, and shelves lined with books. It was a bachelor's home, tidy but lacking feminine touches. "My housekeeper, Mrs. Chen, lives in the small cottage out back," Jack said, lighting lamps against the gathering darkness. "She's visiting her son in San Francisco, but she'll be back next month. In the meantime, you and Sam can have the upstairs rooms." That night, after Sam had been settled in a bedroom that Jack said had once been his own as a boy, Eliza sat with her host in front of the fireplace, a cup of coffee warming her hands. "I'm postponing my trip to Denver," Jack said. "I can't leave you and Sam unprotected now." "But the lawyer, I'll send one of my men with your letter. Travis is reliable, but I'm staying here." "Holt won't stop," Eliza said quietly. "Not until he has what he wants." "No, he won't," Jack agreed, "so we need to find a way to stop him." "How?" "He has money, influence, men willing to do his dirty work." "What do I have?" "You have me," Jack said simply. "And you have friends in Silverwood, more than you realize. People are tired of Holt's methods. They've been afraid to stand against him, but this burning out a widow and child might be the last straw." "I'm not a widow," Eliza corrected automatically. "No," Jack's gaze held hers. "You're not. Something in his tone made her heart race. The firelight played across his features, softening the hard angles of his face. In that moment, Eliza admitted to herself what she'd been trying to deny. She was falling in love with this quiet, steadfast man who had appointed himself her protector. "Jack," she began, uncertain what she wanted to say. A cry from upstairs interrupted them, Sam calling out in his sleep. Eliza rose quickly. "He has nightmares about the fire and losing his father." Jack nodded in understanding. "Go to him, we'll talk more tomorrow." Sam was sitting up in bed when Eliza entered, tears streaming down his face. "I dreamed Papa was in the fire," he sobbed as she gathered him into her arms. "It was just a bad dream," she soothed, rocking him gently. "Your Papa isn't in any pain, he's watching over you from heaven. Like Mama." "Yes, like your Mama." A movement in the doorway caught her attention. Jack stood there, his expression soft as he watched them. In his hands was a carved wooden horse, similar to the one Sam had lost in the fire. "I thought this might help," he said, approaching the bed. "I made it a long time ago, but it needs a good home." Sam looked up, tear tracks still visible on his cheeks. "For me, for you." Jack handed him the toy. "My pa made it for me when I was about your age, said it would keep the bad dreams away." Sam accepted the gift reverently. "Did it work?" "Every time." Jack smiled, ruffling the boy's hair. "Think you can get back to sleep now?" Sam nodded, clutching the horse to his chest as he lay back down. "Will you stay until I fall asleep?" he asked Eliza. "Of course." Jack moved to leave, but Sam called out, "You too, Mr. Jack, please." Something flickered in Jack's eyes, surprise, then a warmth that transformed his whole face. "Sure, partner, I'll stay too." They sat on either side of the bed until Sam's breathing deepened into sleep. In the quiet room, with moonlight streaming through the window, Eliza felt a sense of rightness she hadn't experienced since arriving in Wyoming. Despite everything, losing James, the destroyed cabin, Holt's threats this moment held a curious peace. "He's a brave boy," Jack whispered, looking down at Sam's sleeping face. "Reminds me of James, same determined chin." "Did you know my brother well?" Eliza asked. "Well enough to respect him. He worked hard, loved his family." Jack hesitated. "He talked about you sometimes. How proud he was of his educated sister back east, how he hoped to make the homestead successful enough that you'd come visit someday." Tears pricked Eliza's eyes. "I wish I'd come sooner. You're here now, that's what matters." Jack stood carefully to avoid waking Sam. "Get some rest, Eliza. Tomorrow we start fighting back." The next few weeks established a new routine. Eliza continued teaching in town while helping Jack's foreman, Travis, manage the remaining cattle from James's herd, which Jack had moved to his own pastures for safekeeping. Sam thrived in the stable environment of the ranch, following the cowboys around during the day and returning full of stories about horses, cattle, and ranch life. Word of the cabin burning spread throughout the territory. Families who had previously kept their distance from the Garrison property now stopped by the ranch to offer support: a pie, a handmade quilt, offers to help rebuild once the property dispute was settled. Their kindness moved Eliza deeply, as did their willingness to testify on her behalf about James's character and his clear intention to keep his land. 2 weeks after the fire, Travis returned from Denver with a letter from Daniel Wright. The lawyer confirmed Eliza's suspicions. James had consulted him about pressure from Holt and had filed copies of his original land deed with Wright for safekeeping. More importantly, James had never signed any loan documents with Holt. The papers Holt possessed were almost certainly forgeries. "This changes everything," Jack said, reading the letter. "Wright says he'll come testify at the hearing. With his evidence and the statements from neighbors, we have a strong case." Eliza should have felt relieved, but another emotion overshadowed her hope: dread at the thought of what would happen after the hearing. If she won, she and Sam would rebuild on James's land. They would no longer have reason to stay at Jack's ranch. The thought of leaving him created an ache in her chest she couldn't ignore. The evening before the hearing, after Sam had gone to bed, Eliza found Jack on the porch, staring out at the night sky scattered with stars. "I never properly thanked you," she said, joining him at the railing. "For everything you've done for Sam and me. No thanks needed. Nevertheless, I'm grateful. I don't know what we would have done without you." Jack turned to face her, his expression serious in the silvery moonlight. "Eliza, there's something I need to say." Something I should have said before now, her heart quickened. Yes. When all this is settled, when Holt is dealt with, and you have clear title to James's land, I hope you'll consider not going back there. Confusion replaced anticipation. What do you mean? Where would we go? Stay here. With me. He took her hands in his. These past weeks, having you and Sam here, it's made this house feel like a home for the first time since my parents died. I don't want that to end. Jack, what are you saying? I'm saying I love you, Eliza Garrison. I think I started falling in love the moment I saw you standing in Mrs. Holloway's parlor, looking so brave and determined despite everything. And Sam, that boy, has claimed a piece of my heart I didn't even know was missing. Tears filled Eliza's eyes. Oh, Jack, I know it's fast. I know you came here for James, not to find this. If you need time, she silenced him by stepping closer, raising one hand to touch his face. I don't need time, I need you. The kiss that followed felt like coming home after a long journey, tender at first, then deepening with shared longing and newfound certainty. When they finally parted, Eliza rested her head against Jack's chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. What about Sam? She asked softly. He's lost so much already. Sam will have a mother who loves him, Jack said, stroking her hair, and if you'll have me, a father who already thinks the world of him. The territorial court convened the next morning in the town hall. It seemed all of Silverwood had turned out for the proceedings, the room packed with ranchers, townspeople, and curiosity seekers. Holt sat near the front with his lawyer, looking confident despite the whispers that followed him. Eliza wore her best dress, with Sam scrubbed clean beside her and Jack a reassuring presence at her other side. Daniel Wright had arrived from Denver the previous evening and now sat with them, his briefcase containing the evidence that would hopefully secure their future. The judge, a stern-faced man named Hargrove, called the court to order. Holt's case was presented first, a carefully constructed narrative about loans made to James Garrison, agreements signed, and the unfortunate necessity of foreclosure after James's death. Wright methodically dismantled these claims. He produced the original deed with James's signature, notarized and dated. He presented testimony from his own clerk about James's visit to secure the document against precisely the type of fraud Holt was now attempting. Most damning of all, he called an unexpected witness, Holt's former bookkeeper, who testified that he had been instructed to create false loan documents on several occasions, including ones concerning James Garrison. By the time Wright concluded, Holt's face had lost its confident expression. When Judge Hargrove ruled in Eliza's favor, awarding her clear title to James's property and ordering Holt to pay damages for the destroyed cabin, a cheer went up from the spectators. Outside the courthouse, surrounded by well-wishers, Eliza felt a tug on her skirt. Sam looked up at her, his expression serious. Does this mean we have to leave Mr. Jack's ranch? He asked. Eliza exchanged a glance with Jack, who knelt to the boy's level. Actually, partner, I was hoping you and your aunt might consider staying permanently. Sam's eyes widened. Really? Forever, Jack confirmed. In fact, I was wondering how you'd feel about me becoming your pa. For a moment, Sam looked confused, then understanding dawned. You want to marry Aunt Eliza? I do, very much, if that's all right with you. Sam threw his arms around Jack's neck. Yes. Can Scout stay too? Jack laughed, lifting the boy into his arms. Scout too, and any other puppies or horses or cattle we decide to add to our family. Eliza watched them, her heart so full it seemed impossible it wouldn't burst from her chest. In the midst of loss and struggle, she had found something precious, not just love, but family and belonging. 3 months later, on a crisp autumn day, Eliza became Mrs. Jackson Ackerman in a ceremony attended by what seemed like the entire territory. The small church in Silverwood overflowed with guests, and the celebration afterward at the Ackerman ranch lasted well into the night. Sam, dressed in his new suit, had proudly carried the rings, Scout trotting beside him down the aisle. Now, as the evening settled into quieter moments, Eliza found Jack standing apart from the festivities, watching Sam show his puppy to a group of admiring children. Happy? Jack asked as she joined him, sliding an arm around her waist. Completely, she assured him, leaning into his embrace. They stood together, observing Sam's animated gestures as he explained something to his new friends, Scout faithfully at his side. The boy looked up, spotted them watching, and waved excitedly before returning to his conversation. Jack chuckled. That boy has more charm than a traveling salesman. He reminds me more of you every day, Eliza said. The way he watches everything, thinks before he speaks. He has your kindness, Jack countered, and your stubbornness. I prefer to call it determination. Call it what you will, Mrs. Ackerman. It's one of the many things I love about you. As they watched, Sam took a little girl's hand and led her toward the puppies that Scout had fathered with one of the ranch dogs, a litter that was now old enough for gentle handling. The cowboy watched his boy hold her hand, whispering, "You're winning us both, little one," Jack observed quietly. Eliza looked up at him questioningly. "That's what my father said to me once about my mother," Jack explained. "That she'd won them both over from the first moment. It's how I felt watching you with Sam these past months. He was mine first, in a way the first one to trust you, to love you, and seeing that, how could I not follow?" Eliza stood on tiptoe to kiss him softly. "I'm glad you did." "Always will," Jack promised, drawing her closer as the golden light of sunset bathed the land that was now their home.